We talked earlier about the SWIMS models, and now we're going to talk about the spreadsheet models. And the spreadsheet models came before the SWIMS models. The SWIMS models were the map I showed y'all earlier, where it had the implementation throughout the entire country. The Sacramento, the California Sacramento watershed, so Sacramento, San Joaquin, Tulare, and Truckee were one of the first to be built. So they were built under a version that we're no longer using. So it's like the process to get them districtly implemented is taking a long time. Anyway, but we have spreadsheet models that are essentially they're really simplistic. We have them for each of our core models, and we either have them already for our Section 7 project. So a couple of screenshots today to kind of walk through what they do and what they look like. So the way they're organized is we have an instructions tab. So that way, in case someone's new, they can read the instructions. An overview tab, data review, water your plot, release schedule, some water your daily and hourly data, data parsing tabs. Essentially what we're doing with these models is we're taking the ensembles from the RFC, we're taking the deterministic forecast from the RFC, we're taking CDAC hourly data where appropriate. So for New Bullards Bar and Oroville, we're taking CDAC hourly data. And we're also taking data that's in our own system. So we're putting all that in our system into SWIMS, and then a report is generated. And then we put that report, we connect it to the Excel model, because these are all based on Excel. And from there, the model runs. We also have a water control tab, so that contains all the formulas for the rules for the water control diagram, meaning how top of con is calculated in a situation where you have credit storage from another project, then that would be calculated. Any wetness parameters, all of that is calculated. ESRD tab for New Bullards Bar in Oroville, that ESRD tab is currently under construction. The air capacity table, precipitation data, outlet spillway rating curves, and also outlet curves for the specific outlets, and then any notes that goes along there. So the big four that we deal with on a regular basis, the four tabs, are the overview, data review, water your plot, and the release schedule. If everything's working perfectly, you don't need to go into the other worksheets, but if something breaks, you have to go into it. And one thing of note with these spreadsheets, they are not macro based for two reasons. One, we don't all have the perfect skills. So what if, the person that built it it's in the middle of the night and you're having to run the spreadsheet model and the macro breaks, and the person that's operating the spreadsheet and making the decisions doesn't have that skill set to fix it, then the model doesn't work. So they're not macro based for that reason. They're also macro based because sometimes the core security turns off macros. So the reliability of macros with the skill set, and also sometimes they turn them off from a security standpoint. We just decided they're not macro based. Very easy spreadsheets. They're all based on formulas. So here's the overview page. It's zoomed way out. You can't really see anything, but I'm going to kind of walk through each section and then how it works. So in this part up here on the left, we have the date, some pertinent data. So, what's the top of the dam? What's the max release, etc. What's the current release? Some ensemble processing and spillway status. And then this section, you're looking at a small inset of data. So you're looking at the past 5 days, you're looking at forecasted data for the next 5 days, and then the ensemble data after that for the next 10 days. And then in this section, you're looking at hourly data for the next 7 days. And in here, you're seeing, we'll zoom in more, but you're seeing like how encroached you are, what decisions you want to make, etc. So kind of viewing the pertinent data section, we have the date and the water you're up at the top, the pertinent data as we discussed. All of them have this section, but not all sections need to be filled out because they might not be applicable for your specific project. So not every project has a minimum irrigation release, for an example. Then we have the current release, and we have it set up where it's like what we requested is say 2000 CFS, but then the current outflow from the previous hour was like 2003, just that's close enough. So just to get an idea of like what's requested and what is the current outflows here. Then we have current release and ensemble release section. And I forgot the order of my animation, my apologies. So then at the bottom, we have spillway flowing. And that's really applicable to a spillway that doesn't have a gated spillway because it's either yes or no. With a gated spillway, the answer could be yes, and you're not using your ESRD. So that's really the poor if you have an ungated spillway. But if it's flowing, then it'll turn red and say, yes, it's flowing. And then we also have it where we can manually enter data. And so that's a checkbox. Like if normal operations is manually enter data is not there, so it should say no. If it does say yes, then your spreadsheet's linking to the manual section and you need to fix it. So here are my animations that I was looking for. So for current release, we can also tab on and off the volume, look at the peak and the 1 day, the 3 day, the 5 day. We can do the same thing for the ensemble trace. And then we can also look at the event interval based on the ensembles. And we've talked about over the years, potentially updating how we look at the ensembles in the spreadsheet itself. But, as we know better, we do better. So we'll update that as we go along. So that's kind of the big overview page of like what you're looking at here at the top. The next section is when you're looking at the data itself. This is from a couple last week for New Bullards Bar. There's nothing exciting happening at the moment, unfortunately. So unfortunately, y'all's pictures are in the way. Let me move this. So inflow is red, outflow is green. That's a similar format to our plots on our public website. Top of con is black. Top of con is not showing up here on this plot for some reason. And then storage is in green. You'll see, the last 5 days observed here. Your forecasted data for the next 5 days, and then your ensemble data here. So as you adjust that drop down menu with the ensembles that I showed on the previous slide, then like the trace will change. So here's like 2019, February 28th of Black Butte to give you a better idea. So you actually see how it can work. With Black Butte, the top of con is based on credit storage and also a wetness parameter. So you see top of con in the black, then you have outflow in green, inflow in red, and then the storage itself in blue. So it's like this gives us just a quick screenshot of what's happening. We also have a water year plot, but for some reason, when we opened them this year, like Microsoft decided to completely reformat them and they looked horrible. So there is a water year plot that you can use to kind of get a big picture idea of what's going on as well, but it wasn't as nice and pretty as it normally is. So I don't have a screenshot for you for that today. So then we go down to the next session. Now, this is really where the magic happens. So let's zoom in because you can't read it. So we look at the next 7 days and you'll see, well, I chose Wednesday, but over here, there is the date and the time. You'll see that. This first section right here, this is where you would be entering the release data. With this rules column, it double checks, like, are you going against the rate of change rules? Like, are you increasing too fast or decreasing too fast? And so the release in this column and the green column will format change. So that'll give you a heads up like, hey, you're not following the rules. Here we'll have the inflow. We'll look at Marysville, and then you're looking at what's happening in the reservoir at that time. So we got elevation, storage, what percent encroached you are, and the actual encroachment itself. And these numbers do not look good because something's going funky with the particular spreadsheet, which my original plan was to do a live demonstration. And it's like, Roger was like, maybe you shouldn't do that because that sometimes doesn't work. And then I go and look at the spreadsheet and I'm like, something's messed up with it. So normally it works great, but for some reason it just wasn't happy today or last week when I was working on this. So then there's the data review page. So you can look at like, what's the data it goes out, I think it goes out more than 30 days on this particular spreadsheet. We have hourly, you're looking at inflow, outflow, any pertinent data you want to look at that's nearby, your storage, your top of con, your encroachment, your percent encroachment, etc. So you can see, like, if you want to look at the data itself and not just the plot, you have the data here. Then the next section is the release schedule worksheet. So like when we are calling for specific releases, I mean, we have these in each of the spreadsheets themselves, but like specifically for our core owned and operated projects, like this is where we put in the data. So here's an example from February, a couple of days, well, this is in 2017, showing like, here's the plan for the weekend, and this is for Black Butte, and Black Butte has a weird rule where you have to change, if the release is over 1,000 CFS, you have to change the release every 18 hours. So that's why you'll see this weird toggle. Anyway, the point is to show you, like, here's what a PDF we create when we send the email out for our core projects that say, please make this release. So we have the PDF attached, and then we also describe it in the email in case something gets lost in translation. So that's all I have. Like, they're pretty simple. Unfortunately, my screenshots are not great because something's happening funky with Microsoft. Even with the water year plot, it's like the format was all over the place.